For 8 years, my marriage to Grace was like holding a piece of smooth, warm jade. To call her the perfect wife wouldn't be an exaggeration. She was beautiful, but not in an aggressive, flashy way. There was a gentle warmth in her eyes that made you feel at ease, like settling into a comfortable chair. She was sensible with money, never splurging. The clothes in her closet, worn for years, were still immaculate. But the most remarkable thing was her temperament. She was like a spring breeze, soft and gentle, and rarely lost her temper. In all our years of marriage, she never once raised her voice to argue with me. It was always me, hysterical and losing my cool, while she stood by, quietly waiting for me to calm down. My parents always told me not to mess up a good thing, but honestly, I was exhausted. "Hey, honey, what about tonight? You in the mood?" After putting our son to bed, I tiptoed back into the bedroom, a hopeful grin on my face, and sidled up to Grace. She was propped against the headboard, scrolling on her phone. She didn't even look up, but her face instantly went cold. "Didn't we just do it last week?" "That was last Monday," I pleaded, counting on my fingers and putting on my best puppy dog face. "It's Saturday." "That was 13 whole days ago." After a few minutes of pathetic begging, she finally grunted reluctantly. "I'm going to the bathroom. I'll call you when I'm ready." I practically jumped for joy, nodding eagerly, but the wait stretched into nothing. The grandfather clock in the living room ticked away an entire hour. The sheets were warm from me just lying there, but the bathroom door remained shut. I couldn't wait any longer. I slipped on my slippers and padded over to knock. Grace's voice, tinged with surprise, came from inside. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" I pushed the door open, and my eyes immediately caught her sitting on the toilet, her phone screen glowing. She was on Instagram. "I was waiting for you, wasn't I?" My voice was laced with an irritation I couldn't hide. "I'm in the bedroom, practically dying of anticipation, and you're in here scrolling like I don't even exist," I thought. She glanced at the time on her phone, then looked up at me. "How about tomorrow? It's too late tonight." A surge of anger shot through me, and my voice jumped an octave. "If you knew it was late, why were you in the bathroom for so long?" The last trace of a smile vanished from Grace's face. She put her phone down, stood up, and her tone was as flat as if she were talking about the weather. "Are you really going to throw a fit over this again?" Her words were like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head in the middle of winter, extinguishing my anger and leaving only a bone-deep chill. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I just turned and walked bleakly back to the bedroom. When I pulled back the covers, my fingertips were stiff with cold. Back in bed, I tossed and turned like a pancake on a griddle. The anger I'd suppressed flared up again, coiling into a hot ball in my chest that made my throat dry. The sheets were a wrinkled mess, and I'd flipped my pillow 3 times, but I was still wide awake deep into the night. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I shot up, my bare feet hitting the cold floorboards, and stormed into the living room. Grace was still on the couch, her back to me, scrolling on her phone. The screen's light flickered across the side of her face. I clenched my fists, my voice trembling. "Look at us. Do we even seem like a married couple anymore?" She turned around slowly, her phone still on the Instagram feed. There was a hint of mockery in her tone. "What's that supposed to mean? Because I didn't feel like it tonight, you're going to start another fight?" "You promised me." I took a step closer, my chest heaving. "So what if I promised?" She tossed her phone onto the couch cushion and looked up at me. "Didn't I say tomorrow? You can't even wait one day." "One day?" I practically screamed. "It's been half a month, and we don't even sleep in the same bed anymore." The words poured out of me like a burst dam, getting louder and louder until it felt like the chandelier was shaking. But Grace suddenly went silent. She just sat there, her hands placed flat on her knees, her gaze fixed on my contorted face. She was completely expressionless, like a beautiful but frigid porcelain doll. By the time I finished yelling, my throat was tight. Seeing her so unmoved, my rage suddenly deflated, leaving only an indescribable exhaustion. Finally, I just ran a hand through my hair, turned back to the bedroom in defeat, and shut the door. In the dead of night, the sound was jarring. Lying in bed, the ceiling was a gray blur in the darkness. My mind was a tangled mess of other thoughts. How could a person change so completely? Grace wasn't like this before Noah was born. Back then, she'd always be curled in my arms, smiling, a sweet blush at the corners of her eyes. She'd agree to anything I said. Sometimes, I'd suggest something a little adventurous, like a new position or a piece of lacy lingerie. She'd blush and playfully swap me, but in the end, she'd bite her lip and go along with it. The light in our bedroom always had a syrupy sweetness. The scent of her hair, mixed with her soft breathing, could make the whole night melt away. I was so ridiculously in love with her back then. When she was in labor, the doctor said an epidural could reduce the pain by 50%. I stupidly blurted out, "Then give her two." It made Grace laugh so hard. 3 months postpartum, the first time I touched her, she trembled in pain. A cold sweat beaded on her forehead, dampening her hair, and she bit her lips until they were white. The pained grimace on her face forced me to stop. I figured she just hadn't recovered yet. So I asked my mom to help prepare some nutritious food for her. My mom made rich, white chicken broth every day, soaked sea cucumbers until they were plump, and piled her plate high at every meal. After breastfeeding Noah for 8 months, Grace hadn't lost the baby weight. She'd actually gained a little. After he was weaned, our dinner table was still loaded with food, and Grace seemed to be recovering well. Then one day, everything started to change. She frowned at the table laden with rich food and suddenly announced, "My coworker said I look fat. I need to go on a diet." The pot roast and fried chicken on our table were replaced with bland vegetable salads, with barely a drop of oil in sight. She also quietly signed up for a yoga class and started leaving every evening before dinner. When she came back, she looked like she'd been disassembled and put back together wrong, groaning and holding her lower back, saying all her bones were aching. I'd rub her back and massage her legs, my heart aching for her, and plead, "Can you just stop going? This is just torture. We're married. I'm not going to complain." I'd say, "A little extra weight is cute." In my head, I'd already cursed that meddling coworker 100 times. Grace was 130 pounds before the pregnancy and was maybe 140 now. How was that fat? That coworker of hers was just a jerk. Serves her right for getting dumped by her boyfriend. But Grace would just roll her eyes. "I already paid for it," she'd say dismissively. Life went on like that, blandly, for half a year. She did lose the weight, getting back to her pre-pregnancy size. You could hang a keychain on her collarbone. But her face had a sickly pale quality, and it looked like a strong wind could knock her over. I tried everything to get her to eat more. I'd get up at 5 in the morning to make collagen broth, serving it to her in a delicate white porcelain bowl. She'd take a tiny sip, then push it away, saying it smelled weird. At lunch, I tried to make her old favorite, pot roast, cooked until it fell off the bone. She'd nibble at a couple of bites and say it was too rich. For dinner, I make a thick seafood chowder. She'd stir it twice, have a few spoonfuls, and then hand the bowl to me. She'd look at me, a little embarrassed. "I really can't eat anymore. My stomach just feels blocked." I remembered what she was like when she was pregnant. Back then, she ate 5 meals a day. She'd be yelling that she was hungry at 7 in the morning and could polish off a whole plate of pancakes and bacon. Less than 2 hours after lunch, she'd eat a snack, like a sandwich or a slice of pizza. As soon as it hit 5 in the evening, she'd start asking if dinner was ready. And a midnight snack was an absolute must. But now it was like a clock that had been paused. Her 3 meals a day became optional. For breakfast, she'd have half a bowl of oatmeal. For lunch, a few bites of rice. Dinner was just a symbolic couple of bites of vegetables, claiming she was afraid of indigestion overnight. Her daily intake wouldn't even be an appetizer for me. Her health was visibly declining. She used to wear just a thin sweater in the winter and never complain about the cold, like a little furnace. Now, she was bundled up in a fleece-lined jacket as soon as fall began, and her hands were perpetually cold. One time, she took Noah to the park. A gust of autumn wind blew by, and she came home with a low-grade fever, spending 2 days wrapped in a comforter. I looked at her bundled up with just her head sticking out, her face as white as a sheet of paper. I was both worried and angry. Worried about how her body had gotten so fragile, and angry that even in this state, she refused to eat more. Our sex life became a luxury. We had finally gotten through the difficult 10 months of pregnancy and the postpartum period, and we'd had a good 6 months of happiness. But after she lost the weight, the pain came back. At first, she made a rule, only one specific position because she said it hurt less. Then it became twice a week, then once a week, then once every 2 weeks. Eventually, there was no schedule at all. It all depended on her mood. Sometimes, after I'd waited and waited for her to finally agree, it would get called off at the last minute for some reason. Like tonight, when she just blew me off to play on her phone. Logically, I understood. It was hard enough for her to put up with the pain to accommodate me. But the fire in my body grew like a weed, especially on sleepless nights like this, burning until my insides ached. I'm only 35, in the prime of my life. I could tolerate this kind of bland, passionless life for a day or two, maybe even a month or two. But my life stretched out before me like a road with no end in sight. What was I supposed to do? After a while, one Saturday morning, I finally worked up the courage to say, "What if I take you to see a doctor?" She was feeding Noah some scrambled eggs. Her hand paused, and a smear of yolk got on his chin. "For what?" Her voice was whisper-soft, as if she was afraid of being overheard. "You know, about the pain," I mumbled, scratching my head and avoiding her eyes. "We could find a good specialist, maybe get a prescription to help regulate things. It'll get better over time." The truth was, I had already spent hours online, scrolling through forums. I'd read that her pain could be related to hormonal imbalances. A little medical help could clear it right up. But Grace reacted like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Her face flushed, and the spoon clattered into the bowl. "No," she snapped, then quickly lowered her voice. "It's too embarrassing." "What's embarrassing about it?" I pressed, getting anxious. "If you're not feeling well, you see a doctor. You can't just keep putting up with it." She slammed her hand on the table in frustration. I said, "I'm not going." "Who goes to the hospital for something like this? We're just going to see a doctor. What's the big deal?" "I'm just not going." I wanted to say more, but seeing her eyes turning red and her lips pressed into a thin line, I swallowed my words. That was her all over. She seemed gentle, but she was incredibly stubborn. If she didn't want to do something, you couldn't force her. The next morning, I was brushing my teeth when a sharp yell made me jump. "Leo, look at your son." Grace's voice, cold as ice, drifted from the bathroom. I quickly rinsed my mouth and ran over. There she was, hands on her hips, pointing at a few straight drops of pee on the floor next to the toilet, her brow furrowed in a knot. Our 6-year-old son, completely oblivious to his crime, had already run off to play with Grace's phone. He did it again, peed without lifting the seat. "He learned it from you. That's not fair." I held up my hands in surrender. "I've been doing what you said. I sit down to pee at home now. How is this my fault?" "It's still your fault," she insisted, refusing to back down. "You wouldn't listen when I first told you to sit, and Noah saw you and copied you. Now he can't break the habit. Whose fault is that?" Her completely irrational logic left me speechless. A smart man doesn't argue with his wife. I shut my mouth, turned to get a wipe to clean it up for her, but I couldn't help muttering to myself. Sometimes I really think being a teacher has made Grace's brain go rigid. Take this whole sitting down to pee thing. It was, again, because of one of her coworkers. I have no idea what those teachers talk about all day. A while back, she saw an article a coworker shared with her on Instagram claiming that men peeing standing up splatters germs everywhere and is disrespectful to women's health. She became obsessed, forcing me to sit down. At first, I refused. A grown man sitting down to pee, it just felt wrong, unnatural. But I couldn't stand her constant nagging. She'd bring it up at dinner, while we were watching TV, even in the middle of the night when she was tucking Noah in. She talked my ear off until I finally bit the bullet and gave in. I can't believe that after nearly 3 months of me following her rule, she can still find a way to blame me when our son forgets to lift the seat. I've talked to Noah about it, but when a little kid has to go, he's not thinking about etiquette. "Then you should teach him properly," I finally said, unable to keep the annoyance out of my voice after I'd cleaned it up. She shot back immediately. "Isn't that a father's job to teach his son about being a man?" After dropping Noah at kindergarten, I opened the washing machine with a frown. Sure enough, a damp pile of clothes was sitting inside. It was Grace's laundry from the day before. She must have thrown it in late last night and then forgotten about it after the cycle finished. The clothes had been sitting there all night, and they felt clammy and smelled musty. I sighed, added more detergent, and started a new rinse cycle. The suds foamed up, and the machine began to tumble. For 8 years, I've been the one who does the laundry. It started back when we were dating. The first time Grace tried to wash my clothes, she stood at the sink, scrubbed for a minute, and then burst into tears. Her shoulders were shaking as she told me she'd never had to wash clothes her whole life and it felt demeaning. Seeing her red-rimmed eyes, I was torn between laughing and feeling sorry for her. Who even hand washes anymore? I thought. You just throw it in the machine. At most, you scrub your underwear by hand. You're the one who offered to do it. Is it really worth crying over? So, after we got married, I took over the laundry. In the early years, if I saw Grace relaxing on the patio, I might call out, "Honey, the laundry's done. Can you hang it up?" "Sure thing." She'd chirp back. But then I'd open the machine the next time and find the clothes still sitting there. After that happened a few times, I just stopped asking. It only takes a few minutes to hang clothes, so I just did it myself. But lately, for some reason, Grace has developed a habit of doing laundry in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'd get up to use the bathroom and hear the humming from the laundry room. When I asked, she'd say, "From now on, I'm washing my clothes separately from yours and Noah's." Fine, wash them separately. But then she wouldn't hang them up. The next morning, I was guaranteed to find a damp, balled-up mess in the drum. Now, as the machine started tumbling again, the sound of the water sloshing against the metal drum felt heavy and oppressive. I hung up the clothes, washed the dishes, and sat down on my computer, wiping my hands. The screen flickered to life, reflecting the dark circles under my eyes. As a full-time writer, quality is one thing, but quantity is another. Readers are a lot more forgiving of an author who can pump out 5 chapters a day. I had long ago developed the habit of writing 2,000 words a day. Anything extra, I saved as a draft, so I'd have a buffer if something came up. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing and thinking, and the time passed quickly. At 4:30 in the afternoon, I hit schedule post and got up to pick up Noah. The kindergarten entrance was crowded with parents. My little guy came running out with his dinosaur backpack, saw me, and threw his arms open, yelling "Daddy" in his sweet little voice. When we got home, the smell of dinner filled the air as soon as I opened the door. Grace was in the kitchen in her apron, plating food. The sweet aroma of pot roast mixed with the scent of scrambled eggs with tomatoes made my stomach rumble. I had to admit, her cooking was amazing. It was hard to believe that before we were married, the only thing she knew how to make was instant ramen. "Mommy," Noah dropped my hand and ran into the kitchen, hugging Grace's leg. "Go wash your hands," Grace said, ruffling his hair with a small smile. But once the food was on the table, his true colors came out. He stared at his plate without moving, then leaned back in his chair. "I want to watch the iPad, and I want Mommy to feed me." "No screen time at the dinner table," I said, putting my fork down firmly. He immediately ran to the couch. "If you don't feed me, I'm not eating." Grace didn't say a word. She just walked over to the coffee table, picked up the tablet, handed it to him, and even put on his favorite cartoon. "You can watch until this episode is over." Then, she expertly picked up his bowl and started feeding him. I sighed in frustration and stabbed a piece of pot roast. The savory flavor filled my mouth, but I felt a knot in my stomach. Noah held the tablet, his eyes glued to the screen, completely absorbed. The kid is sharp as a tack. While I'm with him by myself, I never have to worry about him eating. He shovels food in with his own fork like there's no tomorrow. He knows that if he tries to pull a stunt with me, he'll not only go hungry, but he'll also get a swat on the butt. But as soon as Grace is around, he turns into an absolute monster. He needs to be fed. He needs someone to stand by while he's on the toilet. The slightest thing that doesn't go his way results in a full-blown tantrum. He knows perfectly well that, with his mom protecting him, even if I raise my hand, it will never land. Just like now, I was glaring at him, but Grace just gently patted his back. "Hurry and eat. When you're done, Mommy will take you to get strawberries." Noah's face lit up. He swallowed a mouthful of food and shot me a triumphant look. Looking at the smugness on that little face, I suddenly lost my appetite. After clearing the dishes, I was wiping down the table when Grace stood up. "Come on, let's go check out that Spanish tutoring center for Noah." The dishcloth in my hand paused. I remembered she had mentioned it yesterday. So soon, I tossed the cloth into the sink. "Can't we wait until the weekend? They have a free trial class tonight." I didn't argue. I just quickly changed my shoes and grabbed the car keys. The tutoring center was on the 3rd floor of the mall. The hallway was plastered with colorful posters of smiling, happy kids holding trophies. A teacher led Noah into the classroom, gently closing the glass door behind them. Inside, I could see tables and chairs shaped like cartoon characters. The 40-minute trial class was over quickly. Noah came bouncing out, clutching a star-shaped sticker. "Mommy, that was fun." Grace's eyes lit up. She took his hand. "So, would you like to come here for classes from now on?" "Yeah." Noah stuck the sticker on Grace's shirt. She immediately turned to the front desk. "Hi, we'd like to sign him up." My stomach dropped. I quickly walked over and put a hand on her arm. "Hey, maybe we should go home and talk about this first." Grace frowned, her tone clearly annoyed. "Do you have a problem with it?" I glanced at the two teachers standing nearby. They still had their professional smiles on, but their eyes were darting between us. This obviously wasn't the time or place for a discussion. I lowered my voice. "It's not that I have a problem. I just think we should discuss it. If you don't have a problem, then let's just do it. What is there to discuss?" It wasn't that I was against Noah learning Spanish. What kid these days doesn't have a bunch of extracurriculars? I know that true geniuses are rare. You'd have to be an idiot to actually believe it when people say, "Your kid is so smart." But the way Grace signed him up for things always drove me crazy. She never discussed it. She announced it. Last fall, she was out for a walk with her mom and called to tell me she'd signed Noah up for a basketball program she saw on a flyer. Then she sent me a Venmo request for the fee and a reminder. Don't forget to take him every Saturday at 7 p.m. As it was, Noah's schedule was already packed. Piano, soccer, reading, tutoring, math enrichment. Adding Spanish to the mix? I couldn't even imagine. Every time I had to take him to one of his classes, it felt like going in a battle. Grace knew all this. But every time Noah threw a tantrum, she'd pass the buck to me. "You go talk to him. He can't just skip his class." I took a deep breath and tried to be patient. He already has so many classes. If we add Spanish, won't he be exhausted? Then we'll drop piano and soccer, she said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I was taken aback. I pressed on. "Remember when he started the reading and math classes? He refused to go after the second session. Spanish is different. He said he wants to do it." Grace cut me off, her tone a little softer this time. "And I'll be the one to take him to Spanish class." That last sentence was like a stone, sinking all of my arguments. I paid the fee. The teacher handed me the receipt and the class schedule. Grace folded it neatly and put it in her purse, without looking at me once for the rest of the transaction. On Tuesday afternoon, I was staring at my computer screen, trying to meet a deadline, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Grace. "Have to work late tonight. You take Noah to Spanish." The screen's glow made my temples throb. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. But we'd already paid. I couldn't just let the money go to waste. I pinched the bridge of my nose, texted back, "Okay," and closed my document to go get him from kindergarten. After grabbing a quick dinner out, Noah had just settled into his booster seat when he asked, "Daddy, where are we going?" "To Spanish class." "You promised, Mommy," I said, starting the car. In the rearview mirror, I could see his lip starting to tremble. Just as I turned the corner, there was a loud thump from the back. Noah had kicked the back of my seat, his voice thick with tears. "I don't want to go. I don't want to go to Spanish class." "Sorry, buddy, we already signed up," I said, reaching a hand back to pat his leg. "Be good, and I'll buy you some fruit snacks after class." "I don't want them." He was like a cornered animal, kicking the seat frantically. "I was at school all day. I'm tired. Why do you make me go to more school? Are you guys even human?" Thump, thump, thump. He hammered his feet against the back of my seat, making me jerk the steering wheel. The car swerved, nearly scraping a planter on the sidewalk. Terrified, I slammed on the brakes and pulled over. A cold sweat trickled down my back. I turned and glared at him. "Noah, you try that again." He didn't stop. He started crying even louder, flailing his arms and legs, trying to hit me. Tears and snot streamed down his face. "I'm not going. You can kill me, but I'm not going." After nearly 10 minutes of trying to calm him down, his sobs subsided a little, but he was still defiant, refusing to budge. I pulled out my phone. There were only 5 minutes left until class started. Gritting my teeth, I called Grace. "Noah's throwing a tantrum in the car," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe we should just skip tonight and make it up another time?" There was a 2-second silence on the other end before Grace's stern voice came through. "Absolutely not. You can't let him skip the very first class. That just teaches him a bad habit." "But he's refusing to go," I said under my breath, hearing Noah sniffling in the back. "Can you talk to him?" "Sweetie, be a good boy," Grace said into the phone, but Noah completely ignored her. So she turned her attention back to me. I don't care what you have to do. You get him into that classroom. Stop spoiling him. A wave of pure rage shot up from my toes to the top of my head. I completely lost control. Before she could finish, I started screaming into the phone a raw, animal sound. Ah! One of us is refusing to go, and the other is forcing me to take him. What am I supposed to do? What can I do? All the frustration that had been building up for months exploded like a flash flood. My chest felt so tight it was about to burst. My yelling startled Noah, and his crying stopped instantly. But the other end of the line had gone silent. The screen showed call ended. Grace had hung up on me. The car was dead quiet, filled only with Noah's suppressed sobs and my own ragged breathing. When I got home, the living room light was on. Grace was sitting on the couch with a lesson plan book open on her lap. When she saw me walk in, she didn't even lift her head. "Calm down now," she asked flatly. I paused while taking off my shoes but didn't answer. I walked straight to the bedroom. After that outburst, the rage had subsided, but the knot in my chest was still there. I just didn't want to fight anymore. For the next few days, we barely spoke. She cooked and went to work, and I took Noah to school and worked on my novel. We were like roommates living under the same roof. Until the next Tuesday, I had just buckled Noah into his car seat when my phone vibrated again. A text from Grace. "My mom isn't feeling well. I'm going to check on her. You take Noah to class." This time, I stared at the screen for 3 seconds, then typed back K, without any real emotion. I guess after the last time, even getting angry felt like too much effort. I turned to Noah and met his eyes. "We're going to Spanish class. If you're a good boy, Daddy will grant you one wish." His eyes lit up. "Any wish, as long as it's not too crazy." He tilted his head and thought for a long moment. "I want to go to KFC, he said in his little voice, "and get the meal with the toy." I couldn't help but smile. I ruffled his hair. "Deal." Noah didn't make a fuss this time. He went into the classroom with his teacher without a problem. After class, he ran out holding up his hand to show me. "Look, Daddy, the teacher gave me a star." 16. When Grace got home that night, Noah was on the floor, unboxing his new KFC toy. Hearing the door open, he ran over, holding up the little plastic figure. "Mommy, Daddy took me to KFC today." Grace froze mid-step, her expression darkening instantly. She didn't even look at the toy in his hand. Her eyes shot daggers at me. "You know KFC is bad for kids. How could you give in to a request like that?" My laptop was still open, the cursor blinking on the screen. Her words ignited a fresh wave of anger. If I didn't, I shot back, standing up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Would he have gone to class? Who was it that said he had to go? No excuses. That doesn't mean you should spoil him like this." She threw her purse onto the couch, her voice rising. "This is how bad eating habits start. You're his father. Don't you care at all?" "I don't care." I was on my feet now. "Why don't you care? Why didn't you take him to class?" "My mom was sick. What was I supposed to do?" she retorted, jutting her chin out, utterly self-righteous. "Should I just ignore my own mother?" "You always have an excuse," I said, my temples pounding as I started listing them off. "Last time you had to work late. This time it was your mom. And on Saturday you said you weren't feeling well and stayed in bed. And you're the one who promised you'd be the one to take him. And you talk about me spoiling him? Who's the one who really spoils him?" By the time I had vented everything, my chest was heaving and my throat was raw. She watched me with an unnerving calm, as if she were watching a play that had nothing to do with her. Grace slowly stood up, smoothed out a wrinkle on her shirt, and glanced at me coolly. "Is there any point in dredging up the past?" In that moment, it felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me, leaving nothing but a piercing chill. I stood there with my mouth open, all the other complaints I'd stored up stuck in my throat, unable to make a sound. And I suddenly realized how truly awful my marriage had become. 17. That Friday afternoon, while dropping Noah off at his reading class, I sent my buddy Dave a text. "Old spot for coffee." He replied instantly. "Just finished up. See you there." The corner coffee shop smelled of sweet caramel macchiatos. Dave waved me over as soon as I walked in. His latte was already half gone, the ice melting at the bottom of the glass. "What's up, man? You look beat," he said, sizing me up. "Grace getting to you again?" I sat down across from him and ordered an Americano. The bitter liquid slid down my throat, giving me the courage to finally say the words I'd been thinking for months. "Dave," I think I want a divorce. This wasn't the first time I'd said this to him, but Dave always talked me down. Dude, you hit the jackpot and you don't even know it, he'd say. Grace is gorgeous. She's not a gold digger. So she's a little strict with the kid. So what? You haven't seen sharks out there? They'll drain your bank account and still complain you're broke. His words were like nails, always pinning me back down whenever I thought about leaving. I'd vent, he'd give me a reality check, and I'd feel a little better. Then I'd go home with a stomach full of resentment and carry on. But this time, Dave didn't immediately jump in to defend her. He stirred the last of the ice in his cup, then looked up. Are you serious? Yeah, I said, my hand shaking as I clutched my coffee cup. I can't do it anymore. I poured everything out, her coddling of Noah, and then blaming me for spoiling him, the double standards. I told him everything except for the most humiliating part, our non-existent sex life. I told him I thought Grace spoiled Noah because it was easier for her. Giving in to his demands was quicker than waiting out a 2-hour tantrum and then trying to reason with him. But she also didn't want him to become a little terror, so she expected me to be the bad guy and enforce the rules she couldn't be bothered with. But I couldn't do it alone. Isn't raising a kid supposed to be a team effort? I also felt like she didn't respect my job. She seemed to think that because I was a writer who worked from home, I had endless free time. We were both tired from our jobs, but every weekend, I was the one taking care of our son while she lay on the couch scrolling on her phone. When I finished, Dave didn't list off all of Grace's good qualities like he usually did. Instead, he lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and said, "Then do it. Just get the divorce." I was stunned. I thought I'd misheard him. "Better to rip the Band-Aid off," he said, blowing out a smoke ring, his expression unusually serious. "Don't let yourself go crazy." I picked up my coffee and down it in one go. The bitterness flooded my mouth, but my heart felt strangely light. Rip the Band-Aid off. The phrase echoed in my mind. Dave clapped me on the shoulder, saying nothing more. Later, as we were leaving, I asked him why he didn't try to talk me out of it this time. He gave me a sheepish grin. "Well, my sister Jenna just got divorced and moved back. Once you're single, maybe you'd consider taking her out. Get the hell out of here, man. 18. After that, Dave's words, "Rip the Band-Aid off," took root in my mind. A month later, after Grace said to me, "Why didn't you unplug the charger again?" I calmly asked for a divorce. At first, she scoffed. "Are you insane?" It wasn't until I repeated firmly that I wanted a divorce that she said, "Fine, you got the guts? Let's go right now." I was terrified I'd lose my nerve. I dragged her straight to the county clerk's office. We quickly discussed the division of assets. Grace said she wanted custody of Noah, and I didn't fight her for it. I figured I probably wouldn't have another child. This whole experience had been painful enough. I gave her the $750,000 we had in savings and investments, keeping only the house for myself. Mainly because if I didn't have a place, I was afraid my parents would never stop chewing me out if I had to move back in with them. Besides, when we got married, our parents had helped us out a lot, and a third of our savings was from the money her parents gave us. After Noah was born, I stopped being the golden child. Giving the money to Grace was basically giving it to our son. My parents wouldn't object. We each took one of the two cars. Grace had no objections to the arrangement. But as we walked out of the courthouse, it finally hit her that I wasn't joking. She started calling her parents and my parents. I just stood there and listened as she told them, "He's divorcing me because I told him to unplug a charger." I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked away. I went home, turned off my phone, withdrew some cash from an ATM, and left with my laptop. I knew if I didn't get out of there, I was about to face a tag team lecture from my parents. I hid out in a hotel for a solid month. I did nothing but write, pumping out chapters. My readership skyrocketed, and my income for the month topped $10,000. 19. When I finally turned my phone back on, it was nearly crashing from the flood of texts and missed calls. From Grace, my in-laws, my parents. I opened Grace's messages first. She'd sent a lot. At first, it was things like, "You'll regret this," then complaints about Noah misbehaving, and finally asking me to come back so we could talk properly. I sent her a single text. "The waiting period is over. We can go get the final decree." Just in case, I added, "Don't tell our parents. We agreed to a divorce. If you back out now, you're a coward." After all these years, I knew Grace could still be a bit immature. A little reverse psychology usually did the trick. Sure enough, she showed up at the courthouse alone, and we finalized the divorce. I hadn't seen her in a month, and she looked haggard. I wasn't surprised. Kids these days are spoiled by everyone, grandparents on both sides. In our house, he had his mom wrapped around his little finger too. If I hadn't used the thread of a belt when he was little, no one would have been able to control him. When I was with Noah, I just had to put food in front of him, and he'd handle the rest himself. When Grace had him, she had to feed him, wipe him after he used the toilet, brush his teeth for him, and get up for midnight snacks. It was an endless list of demands. Her health was already poor. A month of handling him on her own must have been hell. It's not like I hadn't tried to give her advice. If he doesn't eat, let him go hungry for a meal or two. If he acts up, tell his teacher. There are ways to handle it. But she never listened. Well, none of that was my problem anymore. After getting the divorce decree, I still couldn't escape a beating from my parents. It's hard to believe that at almost 40, I got slapped by my own father for the first time in my life. But at least the divorce was final. Grace packed her things and moved back in with her parents. Fortunately, they didn't live too far away, only about a 20-minute drive from the elementary school. According to my mom, after the divorce, Grace would drop Noah at school on her way to work, and her mom would pick him up. When her mom was busy, my mom would go. I, on the other hand, stayed home and rode in peace. I'd thought it over. If I couldn't give my son a complete family because I needed to save my own sanity, the least I could do was save up a lot of money for him. Enough to make sure he'd never have to worry about finances for the rest of his life. A month later, Dave came to see me. He knew I was officially divorced and wanted to set me up with his sister. I'd known his sister, Jenna, since we were kids. She was a beautiful girl. A few years ago, I'd heard she'd run off to get married to some guy out of state, practically cutting off her parents in the process. Dave told me her in-laws had treated her horribly. After she moved, they treated her like a free maid. When she gave birth to a daughter, they were disgusted it wasn't a boy and didn't even help her during her recovery. She finally couldn't take it anymore and called him for help. He brought her and her daughter back home after the divorce. He said if I was interested, she wouldn't ask for a dime. I could just have her. He even offered to throw in some money himself as a dowry for his sister. You had to hand it to him. Dave was a great brother. But I thought about it and politely declined, saying it would be weird since we knew each other too well. I had just escaped the prison of marriage. I wasn't about to jump right back in. Half a year went by. I saw Noah occasionally, usually twice a month. Every time Grace saw me, she looked like she'd seen a savior. She'd hand the kid off to me, jump in her car, and peel out towards the day spa for a massage. Sometimes we'd have dinner together, and Grace wouldn't pick at her food like before. She'd eat heartily, not stopping until she let out an unladylike burp. I'd silently laugh to myself. See, you got what was coming to you. When Noah asked why we didn't live together anymore, we both tacitly agreed not to tell him about the divorce. We came up with an excuse about Dad being away, making a lot of money for the family, and left it at that for the time being. 3 years passed like this. Neither of us remarried. I wasn't surprised about Grace. I knew her. The pain she felt back then was real. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put up with it for so long. For her, remarrying would be like inviting someone to stab her. She would never do that. Lately, however, Grace had been contacting me more often. She'd frequently text me, saying Noah missed me. One night, she brought Noah over to my place. He played until he was exhausted and fell asleep on the couch. Grace said they'd just sleep over. I didn't object. Noah's room was still there, and the cleaning service kept it tidy. After I fell asleep, I suddenly felt a naked body slide into bed next to me. My first instinct was to push her away, but Grace grabbed hold of my vitals. Her voice was husky and suggestive. I want to see a specialist. I've been on medication for 6 months. Why don't you help me see if it still hurts? After 3 years of celibacy, how could I possibly resist? To my surprise, the very next morning, the vicious woman brought up getting remarried. I decisively pulled on my pants, feigned ignorance, and flatly refused. From that day on, whenever Grace came over, I adamantly refused to let her in the house. But then, unbelievably, she bought the apartment 1 floor below mine. After work, she'd send Noah up to my place and then call me down to hers for dinner. What infuriated me even more was that the woman had managed to get my front door code from our son. One night, I was fast asleep when I felt the mattress dip beside me. I opened my eyes to see Grace lying next to me in a silk nightgown, her hair spread across the pillow, her eyes shining like stars. "What are you?" I nearly shot out of bed. She didn't say anything. She just rolled over on top of me and kissed me, just like when we first started dating. After that night, I finally understood. Grace had set a honey trap. She was trying to slowly boil the frog to lure me back in. She started coming over more and more, and I found myself becoming addicted to her body again. My mind was a mess. One day, while she was out taking Noah to school, I finally gritted my teeth, took the life-sized Rem and Ram anime figures I'd spent a fortune on, and drove them over to the university campus. The dolls were wrapped in clear plastic, their synthetic skin gleaming in the sun. I set them down in the shade of a tree, silently wished them a good home, and walked away without looking back. Maybe she noticed my retreat because Grace stopped mentioning remarriage. We gradually settled into a strange kind of equilibrium. When she wanted to come over, she would quietly let herself in at night. On weekends, we took turns with Noah, one day each. This went on for nearly 10 years. On Noah's 18th birthday, we asked him what he wanted as a gift. He looked at both of us and said, "I want my mom and dad to get remarried." We looked at each other, and in perfect unison, we both said, "Okay."